Hello, my friends. It is I, Rich Filiberto, DM Philly out here on the internet, your friendly neighborhood podcaster, back with you again for another week of House of the Dragon. We're talking about episode 3 of season 2, The Battle of Burning Mill. I am very excited to be here with the queen of Westerosi coverage at Screen and Page Podcast, the one and only LaTonya Starks. LaTonya, how are you?
I'm the queen.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, I was going to say the queen that never was, but then I thought that that's really unfair. I don't really know. You might have been the queen somewhere, and you're certainly at least the queen of our conversations of Westeros here at Screen and Page. I'm so psyched to get to sit down with you every week to break these episodes down. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Just started debate camp, teaching the youth how to talk back.
Yeah,
So it's
we
fun.
need it. We need it. We need to teach those youths how to talk back. Make sure you teach them to go out and vote. I am very excited to break down episode 3. We got a lot this week, a little bit of a controversial episode. I saw the first real critiques flying around on the internet this week. So I'm going to get in, I think, kind of granular because there's really a lot to unpack. I feel like these episodes are so full.
They're so dense.
We really are still feasting in that way. But I also kind of don't want to bury the lead. And so I want to start at the end for whatever it's worth to talk about Septa Rhaenyra's wild adventure to King's Landing, LT. I'm curious because I've seen a lot of back and forth already of this really worked for me, this didn't work for me. I'm worried this feels like late stage Game of Thrones when we sent 7 guys across the continent to retrieve a zombie to fly to the other side of the continent for the queen in the middle of the war. People are a little worried that this is the first indicator that we may be trying to squeeze too much blood from the stone that is fire and blood. But how did this whole kind of final arc of the episode land for you as Rhaenyra is going to make her little espionage trip into King's Landing to meet with the Dowager Queen, Alicent Hightower?
Let me first of all say that I love the idea of dressing up as a nun to, potentially do crimes.
Tremendous disguise. Tremendous disguise.
Yeah. One need only look to Sister Act to know how effective that is. I also love the fact that Rhaenyra was in full Septa garb and still serving face. So that was great. This conversation that she has with Alicent is honestly hilarious.
It really kind of is, especially when we've reframed the whole thing that she's got a knife to her ribs for most of it, makes it even kind of funnier to me, but I'm 100% with you.
Yeah, it's really hilarious to me that she's just like, your guards may take me and capture me, but not before I kill you. And Alicent's like, and then what? And Rhaenyra's like, I've begun badly. It has to start over from the beginning. Rhaenyra goes through a whole emotional arc during this conversation. She goes through the realization of how hurt she would be if her father actually did change his mind.
It's like the first moment she ever really considered it.
Right.
That Alicent might be acting on good faith. And it's such a powerful reaction that we get from Emma Darcy. I mean, they are just exceptional in this role. Yes. This is such good casting.
Such good casting. And we see the tears flow from Emma there, but then the realization that Viserys was talking about the Song of Ice and Fire and Aegon is just like, once again, stop naming your children Aegon. Rhaenyra, you're guilty of this as well.
She does have a baby Aegon. For anybody who is not watching quite as closely as we are, there are currently 2 Aegons on the show right now. We got the boy king Aegon, and then one of Daemon and Rhaenyra's children is in fact Aegon, one of the babies that we had to kind of secret away this episode. I love the whole revelation of it all. It is such a thing for us to, in the modern age, to look at. It makes it confusing, certainly for us as podcasters, to talk about these shows. And I know a lot of the more casual viewers have a hard time tracking all the moving parts. It got confusing in Game of Thrones when everybody had distinctly different names for the most part. So the multiple Aegons really throws a wrench in the works. But I love that we have this moment of Alicent coming to this realization and being burdened with the kind of guilt of it all and the weight of, no, you've made a terrible mistake, insert Arrested Development narrator here. Really, like, it's so good because that was a sticking point for a lot of people at the end of season 1, that it was this misunderstanding that kind of created the war to begin with.
Yeah, but it makes total sense. You know how America runs on Duncan?
Oh yeah, I do.
Alicent runs on guilt.
Yeah.
So she'll love this.
Catholic adjacent, at least.
Very.
Yep.
Just the amount of 7-pointed star belts and jewelry that we've seen from her in this season alone.
Did you notice that your favorite knights are Kristen Cole's horse, the armor on the horse, which we call barding in Dungeons and Dragons? He had a little unicorn, 7-pointed star horn in the front of his horse. And it's like, my God, Kristen Cole, you are so over the top. You are the biggest drama queen on the show with multiple queens.
Yeah. Truly. Anything that happens to Kristen Cole at this point, I'm just like, when are we going to get rid of this guy? And I don't like his new haircut at all.
Battle cut.
It's terrible.
He's got himself the Maximus Decimus Meridius right there. It's the Gladiator 2 haircut, which is another total tangent that I could rant about, but won't. Why are we calling it Gladiator 2? Why can't we just do a cool Pedro Pascal, Denzel Washington, Rome movie? I don't know, but that's what we do now, I guess. I liked the conversation. I like where it leaves us, ultimately. I really like the idea that Rhaenyra had to kind of come to terms for a moment, if only, with this idea that Viserys rejected her in his final moments. And I like these two coming face to face and acknowledging that they know one another better than these outsiders know them, that they did grow up together, and that they know that the men who are going to grab the reins of the dragons in a moment are about to spill untold blood and kind of let the cat out of the bag such that we could never get it back. But I do feel like the contrivance is stretching plausibility right to the edge of my comfort zone, right? I like the nun costume. I was very much thinking of like Gidget Goes to Rome and like, hey, look, it's Gidget Goes to King's Landing. Gidget goes to the Great Sept of Baelor. But I like the guilt that it leaves Alicent with, because I just think that it complicates the whole situation for the Greens in an interesting way.
It does, but it's also Alicent. There's so much about the world that she just will not admit to herself is true, because she can't possibly challenge her own worldview that much. So by the end of this conversation, we get her going, doesn't matter. None of it matters. It's too late. Everything's already been set into motion. There's nothing that I could do to stop it. Where you think about it, it's like, well, you started it. You were the one who has been politicking for years to make sure that your son ended up on the Iron Throne. And then you were the one who kind of gave everyone the idea of a blessing, essentially, from Viserys by misinterpreting his last words and saying that it meant that your son should be on the throne. So if you started it, then maybe you could stop it.
It's too true. It's such a great delivery that we get there at the end. My father is gone from court. Cole is marching. And then even the acknowledgement of her son, you know what Aemond is. Yeah. It's just too late, Rhaenyra. And I appreciate where she's coming from. I mean, she has been robbed of a lot of her temporal power from where we ended season 2 at. But both of them having this kind of come to the 7 moment of acknowledgement about their own choices and the responsibility of this. It acts as a kind of great punctuation from the setup that Rhaenyra, or that Rhaenys, gives us early on. We're getting to the point that nobody's even going to remember how this started. Was it the death of Luke? Was it the murder of the baby? Yeah. Was it when Aemon lost his eye? What actually is it? And just the wait for Alicent to have to go back and recognize how quick and how willing she was to seize any opportunity to go back on that kind of blessing that she gave Rhaenyra in front front of everybody at that big final dinner, that she will make a good queen in front of everyone. Again, like, I like the resolution, and I appreciate that we addressed the prophecy, because that felt like a contrivance in season 1 that hung up a little bit on the way down for me.
Right.
But we need to stop having people sneak into King's Landing, I think, LT. It really is like kind of neutering the severity of everything that is going on here.
Apparently, just there's no security anywhere. It's incredibly easy to get to the Dowager Queen, and we just got to deal with it. It's easy to get to the actual queen as well, and to actually murder her child. So it's just wild to me how many times, like, every episode has had someone sneaking into King's Landing.
Yeah, the great Grace Leader commented on this over with Taryn as she was talking about it. I did not get a chance to listen to the podcast yet. I just saw some of her comments in the post-show recaps Discord. Was like, this is literally every week. And it's like, yep, it kind of is. I mean, on the flip side, I think Gold Star Employee of the Month, put a plaque on the wall, whatever we want to do, for new hire Mysaria, the White Worm MVP on the Black Council here. I mean, very strong acquisition for Rhaenyra to get Mysaria on her side, to be like, yeah, we just need to grab Daemon's fishing boat again. That's no problem. He just went down there last week,
Yeah, Mysaria knows all the inner workings of the Red Keep. She knows everyone's schedule and when they're free, and that is invaluable information to have, especially when you're trying to sneak, once again, into King's Landing and have a conversation with the Dowager Queen.
I loved Mysaria kind of saying to Rhaenyra, do you want to kidnap her or just kill her? And it's like, no, I need to talk to her.
I just want to say words.
Mysaria just like shaking her head like, it would be easier to kill her. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Mysaria being included, I didn't realize how much I would enjoy this, but we have the earlier scene of them kind of talking outside Dragonstone and sea smoke flying in the background. I thought it was just such a beautiful shot that really kind of captured the majesty. We talked about how good the cinematography was last week, but there's something about the way that they're able to evoke Westeros on screen that is just so powerful to me and kind of transportive. But Mysaria coming to Rhaenyra, like, look, at the end of the day, either you or he are going to rule over the small folk, and only one of you has shown any like modicum of mercy. You had me in your grasp. You could have crushed me, but you turned me loose. And for that alone, I can look at you as a potentially benevolent ruler, and certainly the better of the binary choices that we have. House of the Dragon feeling all too much like an instruction manual for us rather than a fantasy story these days. But I really love the setup of like getting Mysaria into the court, especially because of what we'll see with Rhaenyra's small council later, and the way that they're like, maybe we should secret you away, get you out of the room so we can make all the decisions autonomously, Queen.
Yeah, like we wanted to do for days now, since you went off to find your son's body. It's just wild, kind of the misogyny that, still exists, honestly, that the idea that women are too like soft and gentle essentially to be around war, that doesn't make any sense. And it really is, a war of these two mothers in Alicent and Rhaenyra trying to get the men around them to listen to reason, and failing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you talk about serving face, but Rhaenys the queen that never was. I mean, the queen of my heart, LT.
I love her so much.
Is just owning these men, and the whole notion. I really love the way that they're kind of indicting the patriarchy and the way that it's embedded in the systems. And where I noted it a couple of weeks ago, but we really toned down a lot of the kind of gratuitous violence and the sexual violence that was so present throughout Game of Thrones. And I understand why we did include it in the first place, but the fact that we're able to kind of indict these men without just depicting them all in the Ramsay Bolton mold of like sociopathic monsters, I think it's very effective the way that we're getting here. And it's especially just that much more irrational when we rewind to a week ago and the same small council are questioning whether or not Rhaenyra is this cruel woman who sent assassins to kill the
A
infant
baby.
heir, right?
Yeah.
And so in one hand, they're so willing to condemn her as this kind of viper, willing to do the worst of the worst. I mean, kinslaying is a really big deal culturally in Westeros, lest we forget Jaime Lannister's other title, you know? And so the fact that they're then going to just vacillate back to the other side of, no, you're too soft. We need to get you out of the picture. It's time to turn the dragons loose. And we really are indexing so powerfully on some of what we did in the end of Game of Thrones, which is the what it means to turn these dragons loose to do war. Like the country burns at that point. There will be untold destruction and catastrophic loss of life. And we really are trying to depict how the mothers in this war are trying to hold on to any kind of control that they have in a system that does not offer them a ton of control.
Yeah, it is really interesting to watch that happen, especially because now that Daemon is off, you know, quote unquote conquering Harrenhal, the
it was
men
quite a conquering, wasn't it?
Harrenhal conquered him, really. The men, you know, in the small council are used to listening to Daemon, essentially. And he is not gun shy at all. Like he wished there was a war weeks ago. So that, I mean, they've kind of already gotten their preparations ready for this war. And it's really Rhaenyra who's like, maybe peace is a good idea. Rhaenyra and Rhaenys saying, you know, the most prosperous times that we've had as Targaryens since Aegon the Conqueror have been during peacetime. Maybe peace is a better idea than a war between kin and dragons.
Too true. She gives this sentiment at the end. She really reads them for filth. This council would do well to remember our queen wears the crown of my grandsire, Jaehaerys the Conciliator, a prudent ruler, the wisest of Targaryen kings whose reign outlasted every other, even Aegon the Conqueror's. And this is a really important cultural note for us, that the Targaryens came with fire and blood, and their dragons dominated the seven kingdoms and brought them all to bear. These individual kings all bent the knee to Aegon the Conqueror, and he gathered their blades and forged the throne at King's Landing, right? But so as we now have picked up this story, we are into a century of peace. None of these men have ever dealt with war, certainly not war on the level of Aegon's conquering and the fire and blood that the dragons bought. So it's a world currently in Westeros that is insulated from the reality of what this means and what this will actually look like. And there are all these young upstarts like the Kristen Coles that are eager and chomping at the bit because it's a way for to find personal valor and to distinguish themselves, and for their older brothers to get murdered so they can inherit their father's castles. LT, like, I mean, war means a lot in a fantasy setting that it does not in a modern setting. And I think that the books do such a good job rooting all that. That's some of the details that can get lost in the show. But the speech, I mean, it really is to impress upon them her restraint is wisdom, not cowardice. So back the F up. And by the way, she is the queen. So really back the F up. And also you know not what you wish for. Like, you know, fear what will come should it be answered. And I just love the setup. I think it's so powerful. And Rhaenys is really the MVP counselor of the room.
Yeah, I mean, Rhaenyra just needs to have all those men whipped one good time.
That
and
would
they
help.
They'll calm down. She doesn't have to kill anyone, you know?
It might help. We opened the episode on the whole Hatfield and McCoy bit. The Brackwells and the Brackens, LT, still at it, same as ever. Lest we forget, in season 1, there was a great scene when Rhaenyra is kind of traveling around the kingdom, and all these lords are swearing their fealty to her as their heir. That I believe it was a young Lord Bracken who had to like fight a duel to the death in her honor. And I think it even was at Harrenhal, maybe. But it was such a great great moment. And I think an excellent, like horrific kind of Civil War-esque setup to this whole episode to get us going.
Yeah, that little child killed that man.
And did little Mike Bloom. That was baby Bloom.
Now we have a skirmish between a couple teenagers.
Yep.
Causing an incredibly bloody massacre to occur. There are just so many dead bodies in that field when they panned over it.
They really are. Like, you know what's coming as the camera starts panning back, but they went so hard. There was not like an inch of grass visible. That was a lot of death, and things haven't even really started yet. Like, both sides are kind of chalking this up as to like a skirmish on the edges of the kingdom to a degree. Nobody's formally really, except for Aegon, the Boy King, acknowledging this as a formal first kind of battle of the war. It's very different in the book. It's an actual military action, and very notably, young Mike Bloom, who dueled in Rhaenyra's honor, it's the same guy who will die in a duel to the death that kind of precipitates all of this. But the show's done a pretty good job setting this conflict up in the background. Like, I think last episode we heard about the Blackwells and the Brackens at the small council at Dragonstone and how they were starting trouble. And in the after the episode feature, they talk about how this is a microcosm of the Targaryens family, and I think that the metaphor is really powerful. Again, back to kind of Rainey's with the thesis statement of this episode, that these conflicts go for long enough that sin begets sin begets sin, and we know it doesn't even matter where they really started. We'll hear it later from the kind of castellan of Harrenhal, as he says the exact same thing. Nobody even remembers why they hate each other, but they do. So don't worry about it. We just have to accept it.
Yeah, the fact that your feud goes back so far in time that no one can remember why, not even the people that are feuding can remember why they hate the other people. It's just, you move the stones that demarcated our land from yours, and therefore you must die.
Don't mess around with the cow pastures. You don't want to mess with another man's cow pasture. You don't know what kind of mushrooms he's growing out there. I love the way that we go from that cold open to the burial of the twins. And again, we're really hammering away on this idea of the division in the family, the civil war in the nation, right? The whole like American Civil War and the way they talk about brother fighting brother. All of that is really very at the forefront. And a really beautiful note that Rhaenyra and her family are all there participating in this burial, and they do put the traitorous brother into the ground with their loyal man, probably because they didn't know who was who, right? But I appreciate that they bury both these guys together.
Yeah, and we see Rhaenyra like throwing in a little dirt, to honor them. The whole time, her son is like, why aren't we fighting more? Essentially. It's just the little family feuds that are bubbling up all around the show are so interesting. Like, we see more and more of the small folk that are going to be involved later in the feuds between family with the Targaryens, and it just underlines the tragedy of these two brothers, having to die, like fight each other to the death over a brother and sister not being able to get along with each other.
Yeah, it's just so devastating the way that the blood like spills outwards. I talked a little bit about the credits. The credits have been such an incredible level up. I mean, I can't not acknowledge the Wheel of Time, because the Wheel of Time literally is about the weaving of tapestry, and they did the same thing in season 1, and it feels influential, and I love the Wheel of Time. But we got the death of baby Viserys at the beginning in the tapestries this week. And then we go right to the rat catchers and the hanging of the rat catchers, which I didn't index on a lot when we talked about it, but it's a kind of a great lore point, because if we recall in Game of Thrones, the Red Keep is filled with cats, and this is an in-canon thing in the book, that after the rat catchers all get killed, Otto Hightower brings 1,000 cats into the keep, and that's the end of that. We never have official court-sponsored rat catchers again, but I just love it as an emblem at the beginning to remind us like the death of the first royal, but also the first kind of casualty of the small folk that precipitates this war and the dance with dragons and the way that the blood is going to kind of flow through the
Right.
entire tapestry and pollute the Targaryen bloodline and flow across the land, consuming all these small folk. It really is a powerful theme. And we do get some really interesting small folk stuff this week as we're going to meet Ulf White, who gives us a whole great story about his half brother, the King Viserys, and Daemon Targaryen, and his niece, the rightful queen, Rhaenyra Targaryen, not the first of her name. How'd you feel about this introduction of Ulf the White?
I did not know who this character was at all until he started talking. I figured that he was going to be important because he got the dolly shot following, and like the tracking shot following
we got the big tracking shot.
Yeah. So I was just like, okay, I guess I should pay attention to this. It's so interesting how he goes from saying, and her rightful heir, Jacaerys Targaryen, and then everything goes quiet because the king walks in, and he's the first to say, "All hail the king."
Oh yeah.
Like he's obviously smart enough to know that he can't just enter into open rebellion when the king is standing right in front of him.
No,
but
good choice.
He's not so smart that he's not telling an entire bar full of drunk people that he is a Targaryen bastard.
And I know a little bit about storytelling, LT. This was not new material. This guy has got his 5 minutes set tight. He really he knows exactly how to kind of run through it. He's got, his marks in the crowd that are kind of backing out. Look at his hair. Look at his hair. What? You don't believe him? But it's a really beautiful setup. Ulf was in a single shot when the rat catchers got hung. He's the guy that comes walking up asking, hey, what happened?
Oh,
what's
that's
going
him?
on here? And so it's kind of cool that we're pulling him forward. It's just a great little bit of setup that I think will feel more satisfying on the rewatch, right? And notably, the serving woman at the table with Ulf and all his buddies was the woman who was victimized by Aegon in season 1 when he goes down amongst the low folk. And she herself with the very blonde Targaryen adjacent hair, right? We know like hair colorations and the delineation. This is very important thematically across Game of Thrones, way back to the days of Ned Stark, lest we forget, right? So this is interesting. Ulf never declares himself as Ulf the White. That's what he's called in the books. This is a relevant character, certainly. But he gives us the whole drill. The idea that Balon, who was the father of Viserys and Daemon, was hanging around down here in the brothels just like all the Targaryens are tonight. And I love how we literally have the whole crew roll in. Like there's 2 Targaryen like royals here in King's Landing, and both of them are in this brothel as he's telling this story. If we need a little bit more validation that Ulf may not just be into his cups, but he notes this term dragon seeds. And he says, dragon seeds that like me, we don't have white cloaks to protect us. I've got to watch my own back. So this is all notable setup to have Aegon arrive and find his erstwhile brother in the lower chambers. But I really liked it. I thought it was pretty effective.
Yeah, it was very effective. And you know that they're setting up a character that's going to mean a lot later. I would like to know when they're going to get guns in King's Landing, because the server definitely needs one.
No joke. Maybe before Rhaenyra heads back to Dragonstone, she could stop by and hand off her little pocket knife for just poking in the ribs of these jerky customers. She could certainly use something.
She needs something. It's terrible what she's been going through.
Let's talk about the other standout moment, because I know a lot of people really hung up on Rhaenyra's wild adventure, but Aemon the Fierce, LT. My man put it all out there. He put on his armor in his nudity to absolutely seize control of that entire room of knuckleheads and command every bit of masculinity as he strides down the hallway. How did this work for you as Aegon finds his brother with Madame Sylvie and just kind of torments him and brings him right back to his 6-year-old pig riding self?
Dongs. We got dongs back on Game of Thrones.
We're hanging dong. It's back, baby.
Bring in the dongs. Listen, anything that's going to even up the nudity score between the men and women on this show, I will allow it.
We're going to need to stack a lot more Aemons on that side of the scale to catch up, I think.
I really do think that it is telling that Aemon just like lays in the fetal position at this woman's like place of work. That's just like a thing that he does, and she has to deal with it for however many hours he chooses to drone on about how his mother never loved him or they made fun of him when he was a child. It's nice to know that everyone is still stuck in their 12-year-old selves, because the Aegon is just a giggling idiot. He is so stupid in this scene. And yeah, he's just going back to what he knows when he was played by Ty Tennant and just making fun of his little brother and getting drunk with his friends.
True.
And Aegon is just like, well, I will call this woman a whore, because of course I will, and put her down in order to boost myself up. And then I will do the weirdest possible thing, which is to walk naked away from this situation in order to get the high ground, essentially. So I guess it works in that way that like male peacocks tend to get what they want when they show a little plumage. But it's a weird scene. It's just weird. Like there's the cackling coming from Aegon and just like the silence of Aemon. And you know that someone is going to pay the price for this down the line.
Feels like, I mean, it felt, Ewan Mitchell, I don't know how I feel about this guy. He's so striking. He's got such striking face, you know? That jaw does feel like it was carved out of granite or something. And I don't know. It's almost alien to me. I'm not trying to impugn the guy. I fully appreciate how kind of like stunning he is as a human being, but there's something that like makes me nervous every time he comes on screen. But I really love, I mean, the Arrested Development, to your point, is strong in this bloodline. They're both just totally still children, and the way that his brother's torment and teasing words, like he curls up even tighter. He comes up off the bed, but just tucks himself in, pulling his knees up to his chest. He's such a little boy, and he's so kind of overwhelmed by Aegon's tormenting. And Aegon is just so petulant and is so lording. You could see the way that the power that he has as a child, as the older sibling, is the same as the way that he's now kind of wielding the power of the throne. And he's so fast to dominate and belittle, to try to build himself up after his whole bout of imposter syndrome, as he puts on great grandpa's too big armor and realizes that like his up jumped friends that he just gave promotions to are going to be too blind drunk to defend him when the next assassins show up, right? But he's able to dominate his brother in this moment, and he seizes it, and Aemon shrinks until he does not. There's that moment of no, like I'm not a child anymore. It is, he stands up and turns around on the bed. Like the nakedness, I think it's used certainly for the shock value and for the titillation when we're on these HBO television shows. But the way it's portrayed in this moment, it's especially about vulnerability, right? And he should be so vulnerable, but he just owns everyone. And while Aegon is pretty much unfazed and is still the older brother and the king and mad laughing, completely out of control, all the rest of those boys, they were looking at nothing but their feet, LT. They like shrunk right up as that guy and his glittering sapphire vampire eye, came striding out of the room. Like, don't look at him. Just don't look at him, you know? And I liked it because he is scary and dominant and feels draconic in that way, you know?
Yeah. I
So
mean,
it feels, yeah.
I love the character of Aemond. I really
Mhm.
do. I do not like that he killed Viserys, but I also think that he just had to take credit for that in the end.
Hurt
Because
people,
what
hurt
else was he gonna
people.
do? And
Yeah.
he's also notoriously known for punching down. Like
Yes.
he wanted to fight his like smaller, not as like battle ready nephews, but when Daemon was ready to square up to him at that disastrous dinner that they had at right before Viserys died, he backed down immediately. So, like, he knows how to choose his opponents, which I know someone who is well versed in combat will often do.
Mhm.
But he punches down a lot.
Mhm. It's true because it's kind of the learned behavior that he's got. That's all he really knows, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a frequent listener and friend of the podcast, Iron Steph, had sent me some feedback last week where she was asking specifically about Alicent and about the Targaryen children on Alicent's side and
Mhm.
how dysfunctional they are and what kind of a lack of a loving parent they got and why we
Yeah.
might think that is, you know. And I had kind of said that I think that there's a real irony there because I think an element of Alicent is looking at the Targaryen family like, God, they're effed up. I will not let that happen to my children. But also, this woman had no mother. Her mother
Yeah.
died very young, and she's raised as a political piece in the royal court by her
Right.
absolute
Her dad.
Machiavellian father. And that's all she knows, right? She's a child bride to the king and ultimately is very absent for her children. So the idea that Aemon has learned this punching down behavior from his brother, who's been punching down on him his entire life, right? That in this kind of insular ecology, there's only so many places to go. And he's not going to challenge Daemon Targaryen because he knows. I love Aemon as a character. You know, Daemon gets a lot of love from the fandom, but I find it really important to point out again, and I will never let us forget, Daemon is a sick bastard. Like
Oh
Daemon's a
yeah.
bad man, you know. And while Aemon is like a little monstrous and has some bad instincts, I do think that he's nowhere near as indictable as his really dark uncle. You know,
Oh yeah. Daemon becomes less and less likable every single episode.
right?
So there's that. I mean, I also think that he learned his behavior from his mother as well.
Yes, fair.
Like, you know, she started on the day that those kids were born, she started calling them bastards to everybody that would listen,
Mhm.
except for Viserys, who would not listen. So all that she ever learned, or all that he ever learned from his mother, was how to talk shit about people and look down on them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Reminds
that's
me
the
a
only
lot of my
parenting he really
family.
got. Yeah.
It's true, though. It is true. And it was a great observation I heard somewhere else in the last couple of days that I don't remember. But in the books, Rhaenys Targaryen, Eve Best, has black hair. Her mother was a Baratheon, right? And we
Oh,
know that the Baratheon bloodline is strong, that the hair is
yeah.
strong with them. So it's a little less overt that the strongs are strongs, you know? It's not, it's more of a debate. There are royal Targaryens in the line that do not adhere to the silver hair, purple eyes kind
Yeah.
of
Jon Snow.
DNA profile. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think Alicent bears a lot of responsibility for the sick and toxic children. We talked about him a little bit. Daemon and Caraxes arrive at the ruins of Harrenhal. He's going to conquer it, but there's not a hell of a lot to conquer as he kind of rolls into dinner and they're just like the Castellan. Laris's uncle is like, we have venison and black cabbage. Have a seat, you know? I'll get you some silverware. My lord. I mean, your grace.
Right. Daemon. First of all, if you enter a haunted mansion and it's raining and it sounds like people wailing the rain and the wind, then you typically turn right around and you get back on your dragon and go home. You don't go and declare that that place is yours. It's Harrenhal, bro. Like, why would you? I understand garrisoning troops there. Okay. It's cursed. It is a cursed place. And
feel
you
like
have terrible karma coming your way.
these are like the Scream rules for Westeros that we're getting from
Yeah.
you, LT. I know that you are a horror aficionado.
Like, just like run away from the actual wailing that is happening from the wind and the rain. That, and it's like all, the rain is coming through every crevice of that castle. I can't imagine it's comfortable to sleep there. They say they can never get the fires lit properly. It's probably cold as hell. Like, what are you doing?
Best hope that none of these Targaryens have mold allergies, because they're going to have a real tough time in that place. I love the setup. Caraxes is an awesome dragon. The show has done such a fantastic job with the kind of visual design. And I think that, one of the things that I specifically and nobody else cared about in Game of Thrones was the lack of individualization of Rhaegal and Viserion from Drogon. Like,
Yeah.
Drogon was the only dragon we ever cared about, and
Yeah.
the other two were just there to fill out the screen a little bit. And I used to get so irate because I love those dragons, LT. But
I love the dragons.
I'm sure you do. Caraxes embodies this weirdness. It just is so weird compared to the other dragons.
Yeah.
The crazy long neck and his weird, like, extra tail, membranes kind of. And it's just such a good fit for Daemon, this guy who is very much marching to the beat of his own drum. But I love the big wide shots coming in above the broken ruined castle. And then we get down in here, and I am a little bit like, what are you doing here, man? Are you just here looking for death? Like, what if 20 guys jump out of the hallway and just overrun you? Like, you're not impervious. The dragon cannot help you in the hallway, homie. Like, what's going on?
And everyone can hear you coming because you insist on wearing all of the armor that's ever been created by.
Yeah, right. Every piece of it. But I do love the arrival as he kind of comes in to Sir Simon Strong, the castle, and like, I'm conquering Harrenhal. Well, yeah. I guess it seems you are.
So.
He's just so quick to come around and bend the knee. But this does get us to the setup of Daemon, like, your grace, your grace. I will not be the prince to the queen. I will be the king to the queen. And it's a small and subtle distinction, but it's setting up like a real shoe that's going to drop on this guy's head.
It's not small. It's not subtle. It doesn't happen to every guy, and it is a big deal.
At least he's always got Caraxes, I guess. He wakes up as somebody, or he doesn't wake up, but he kind of bars his door. Somebody's trying to force their way to the room, but are they? As then he ends up in the hallway, and here she is, famous forever. It's Millie Alcox, as she gives him the line of lines. It's so good. Like, oh yeah, you're always coming and going and just leaving me to clean up after you like my whole life. And it affects him. This is where we get like good Matt Smith crying Daemon Targaryen. I kind of like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The thing is that Matt Smith is such a good actor, and he's so good at making people that you despise lovable that it's hard not to root for him in different ways. But in this way, I am ready for Daemon to get his comeuppance, honestly. Like, killing a child is a step too far, even for me.
It's pretty dark. Yeah. I mean, I do not approve of Daemon. I'm a big fan of Caraxes, much more so than Daemon, I guess. But we have this moment as he then like blinks away the vision, and he's outside in the courtyard. He's at the weirwood tree, the old gods. And I've talked a bit about the Strongs as the lords of Harrenhal, and Harrenhal is right next to the God's Eye Lake. This is a very mystical place in the world of Westeros. Even the curse kind of adjacently affiliated to that. But here is this mysterious woman whose name I guess I won't say because we haven't heard it on the show yet, standing in the courtyard like, you're gonna die here, bro. And then she just rolls off. How did this land for you? How's this work?
Well, I love Gail Rankin, first of all. Those of you all who haven't watched Glow, you definitely should.
Oh, I love Glow, and she was so familiar to me, but I didn't put that together till you just said it.
Yeah, she's like the wolf woman on Glow.
Oh my God, she absolutely is, and now I can't unsee.
I love her so much, and I also love that she gets to use her American accent apparently in the show.
Yeah.
Unless that was just like a fluke, and then she'll have a different accent when we see her later.
It was a little jarring. It was a little Kevin Costner, Prince of Thieves for me, but I'm okay with that generally.
If someone is going to show up in the dark of night while I'm having a vision and tell me that I'm going to die in that place, then I'm going to leave that place. I'm not going to double down, which I'm sure is what Daemon is going to do.
I saw a lot of side by side pictures of her and young Luke Valerian, who got eaten by Vagar once upon a time, which may or may not prove relevant down the road. So I'll just put that out as a footnote for us.
Wow.
But she did look a lot like Luke, which I guess maybe we could imagine some strong bastardry in there somewhere. Yeah.
It's possible, but it's also really cool to see, you know, when everyone else is kneeling to Daemon and like, you know, saying, of course you have the castle. She walks in and is like, what the hell is going on in here on this day?
Mm-hmm.
And she just stands there looking at him like he's a fool, because he is.
He is a bit of a fool. There's a way that she left the scene. It's a very small thing, but the way that she walks out, she's clearly taking huge strides underneath her dress. And it just struck me because she kind of leaves the scene very quickly. I love the setup. Daemon at Harrenhal is a through line we will track. We'll talk about it more as we get more of it, but the setup is pretty good. The idea he wants to rebuild the castle because we need to garrison everyone here. The Brackens and the Blackwells, this whole kind of conflict started there. Grover, Tully, everybody gets upset when George Martin names characters after Muppets, but I kind of love it. But Grover Tully sucks. Most of the Tully lords suck. The Tully women are awesome. And so we need to get the Tullys together. The Riverlands, a very populated, thriving kingdom of the Seven Kingdoms. So we have the potential to marshal the biggest army here. And that's kind of what precipitates the other side of it. As Criston Cole's going to ride out from King's Landing on his unicorn horn, 7-pointed starred horse, and we're going to meet another Hightower as Alicent's brother, Sir Gawain, shows up, and he does not seem to love Criston Cole very much until Criston Cole saves him from getting eaten by a dragon later. But it's very interesting as we get this set up. Criston Cole's first official act as the Hand. We see your oversized necklace, Sir Hand. You're clearly not compensating for anything there.
Nothing at all.
But he's going to ride out with like these 6 guys and their army, and they're going to try to gather up. It's articulated a little better in the text, but the idea is they're going to get all the people that have sworn loyalty to Rhaenyra, and they're going to ride up to their castles and knock on the door and be like, hey, we're here. Team Green is here. You still want to swear loyalty to Rhaenyra, or do you want to join your host to ours? Because if you're with Rhaenyra, then we'll kick the doors down and hang you and take your soldiers anyway. So this is kind of the plan, to steal away all of her loyal bannermen before she can kind of get to them.
Right. How do you think that's going to go?
Oh, just great. Gotta go, just great. But it really sets up the awesome scene that we get later as Baela shows up on Moondancer. I love the notes, the Ryan Condal notes on the design for Moondancer. He says, we just told them David Bowie, go for it. And we got the crazy
beautiful
green tiger dragon with a mohawk, but this is Moondancer and Baela Targaryen, and she's going to drop in and kind of harry them into the trees. I really love this scene.
I love that they have to run away and they are so scared. And she's really just toying with them at this point. The look on her face when she looks down and she's like, is that who I think it is? That's really Criston Cole? Okay, I'm going to mess with him. And she's definitely Daemon Targaryen's daughter.
Yeah, no joke. Moondancer, just cool dragon name. I love it. And again, very fun design. I never would have thought David Bowie there, but I really did like the stripes and the mohawk and the whole thing. And you know that, yeah, Criston Cole Squire was spending some time cleaning out the codpiece of that armor. This is a very messy ride home. Those boys were scared. Gawain Hightower, like, I'm sorry, no more ins. I'm sorry, Sir Criston Cole.
Know.
I owe you everything.
Freddie Fox, who I've seen pop up in just so many different things, has popped up here again. He definitely clocks earlier when Kristen is talking to his sister and asks for her favor. Though it seems like, I don't know if Kristen becoming Hand of the King and her father getting fired has done this, but it seems like maybe they're on the outs right now. Those two,
Does
Kristen and
feel like that. What is that? Do we think
Alicent.
that that's like Alicent, has to kind of be the dom and Christian's got to be the sub? Or is it much more of a like, oh, I've lost all my political power and I'm just am mad that I no longer have any power and I'm not like feeling it?
Porque no los dos,
Yeah.
losing
Yeah.
all your power makes you feel a lot less dominant.
Fair. Fair, fair. Before we realized this was her brother, I'm like, oh, Alicent moving fast. This
What?
guy's not even out the courtyard, and she's already like got eyes for a new man. I love the introduction of Gowan. This is a character that is like a footnote in the books, and so I think it belies some interesting choices. We also hear about Alicent's other son again,
Yeah,
Darren, down in Old Town. His dragon's almost at fighting age. That'll probably be important in season 3, I guess.
probably important for us to note later.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So the other half of Damon's children is Rhaena, who is going to be sent off with the babes of Queen Rhaenyra and the baby dragons, and importantly, a box of eggs. And this is a real moment of conflict internally within Team Black that we've not seen a lot of before, outside of Daemon and Rhaenyra, really. But the idea
Right.
of these two sisters, and one's a dragon rider and the other is not. And of course, Vhagar was her mother's dragon. And there was this kind of presumption that Bela may be able to take Vhagar as her mount, but Aemon got there first and just kind of jumped the gun. And so, in that way, she's a really interesting character. And it's a little bit different, the kind of orientation as we're going to send the kids off. But Rhaenyra having to send her children away so that she can compartmentalize herself and really prepare for war. And Rhaena is the bitter sister who like does not get the respect from her family because she does not have control of this incredibly powerful weapon. It's really poignant. And I thought very, very good setup.
Yeah, I initially, when watching the scene between Rhaenyra and Rhaena, I was just like, man, Rhaenyra, you're being a terrible stepmom right now. Not only are you sending her away and making her feel like she's superfluous to the efforts that you're putting forth, but you're making this very young woman be in charge of these 3 babies, which is, like taking away all of her ability to discover who she is and be someone in this life. You're just saddling her with kids that she didn't have and saying that it's her duty to take care of them. It wasn't a great moment for Rhaenyra, honestly.
It's a big ask, and it's further complicated by the issue of that moment you realize your stepmom is your niece and your sister-in-law, like all of these other things at once, like really loads it up. I love the words, the way that she delivers it. I can't promise that I'll make you happy, be the mother to them that I can't, but it really is not an ideal pick, I don't think, to take this girl who has this brewing resentment towards you and potentially the rest of your family and very clearly her father, and put her in charge as the steward of these children. I mean, it goes to kind of show just how stretched the resources on Team Black are in a certain way. There's just not a lot of players that can be trusted with Rhaenyra's interest in mind. And so in that way, everybody with the last name Valerian or Targaryen are invaluable to her. And there has to kind of be this supposition of trust extended. But it felt really tragic for poor Rhaena to have to roll off and, be the babysitter of these kids, as it were. And I'm curious to see how much more of their story we're going to get, or if it's going to be a little bit of like Tommen in Game of Thrones, like out of sight, out of mind, Or Tommen Rickon. I'm sorry, Rickon. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope it's not out of sight, out of mind, because I really like what this actress is bringing to the role of Rhaena.
Mm-hmm.
That's Phoebe Campbell. And it's just there's just something behind her eyes, you know, that's
Mhm.
so compelling and captivating. But it does feel like it might be out of sight, out of mind, because we're about to get into the depths of war, and she's not someone who's gonna come into play in it for a while, if at all.
Indeed. Yeah, like episode title spoilers for next week. If you're sensitive, skip ahead 15 seconds. But I believe episode 4 is named The Dance with Dragons. This week, much
Mm,
slower than I expected it to be. As excited as I was for how pensive and kind of intimate episode 2 was, we really slow rolled again. And I do feel we've gotten right to the edge and kind of run out of runway of the conciliation and the efforts to subvert this war. I mean, we all know where it's going, and it
right,
feels like they're just doing a lot of like kind of character rehab to make Rhaenyra the clear protagonist of our story in a certain way. And I do
right.
think that that's very valuable for casual viewers. You know, I talk to a lot of folks that are not nearly as dialed into television in general or this show as I am every week. And the consistent theme in the last couple of weeks is I'm having trouble tracking all the people. Who are they? Why is this important? There's nobody to root for. So while some of the very engaged fandom, I think, are a little bit cynical about Rhaenyra's kind of glow up that we've gotten and her absolute 11th hour efforts to stop this war that is clearly coming. I think it's probably important for a lot of the viewers of this show. It's much bigger than the number of folks that have read the book. And it sets us up for what's going to probably be a pretty harrowing episode 4.
I'm very much looking forward because this is kind of a mid-season finale
It
almost.
kind of is. We're doing a really truncated runtime. We only have 7 episodes. It's not really truncated, but it's shorter than we might expect. And as long as those 7 deliver, I'm excited about that. There is a theme of the 7 in Westeros that makes it kind of fun. But yeah, this is just about halfway through the season, which is a bummer, but it's set up the players, I think, very, very well.
Yes, it has. I'm very much looking forward. Like this was probably my least favorite episode of the season so far.
Sure, yeah.
Um, but I'm intrigued by all the setup that it's done and the characters that it's introduced us to and reminded us of as well.
Yep. I'm very much with you. I would say it's my least favorite of the season so far, but I think last week was my favorite of the whole series so far. So
Exactly.
no
Yeah.
sweat in that way. The small notes I just want to hit before we part ways, but the Alicent and Helena scene was absolutely, I mean, again, Fia Saban like
Oh my
owning
gosh.
LT. She is so good in this part. To have that
Yeah.
one tiny little scene and just like destroy Alicent, I forgive you. Don't worry.
Yeah. And it's hard given that she, you know, is someone who has visions to know if she's forgiving her for something that she's done or something that she's going to do.
That's a wonderful point. I love the humanity that we got through her as she's just talking about her own experience. And I think it's very tragic. I mean, she's kind of emotionally cauterized the wound in a certain way. But the way that she's talking about how the commoners probably lose a lot more children than highborn ladies. What right
Yeah.
do I have to more grief than them? It really just an aside that doesn't have a lot of charitable characters. Helena is doing a very heavy lift, at least for me. And then the other note are these 3 eggs that Rain is going to take with her, I think confirmed by Ryan
Yeah.
Condal, the showrunners, the powers that be, that these are the eggs that Daenerys will get in a Game of Thrones proper. Do you love this, LT? Do we need this?
I'm sure that lots of people enjoyed it. People have been asking where Daenerys's eggs came from for a long time. And so to get this kind of in-universe confirmation is probably great for people. I'm just surprised that the eggs are so old by the time that she gets them.
The caveat I will throw, I liked it. I appreciate any kind of tactile, practical stuff that comes down to talking about the dragons, raising the dragons, training the dragons, moving the dragons, like the logistics. I like this kind of stuff in my fantasy. So it was satisfying in that way. But I just have to say this. Once upon a time, I did co-anchor the book club for House of the Dragon. Now we get to just talk about the episode proper because we've built our own castle, LT. So more power to us. But the book fans will know there's a very notable character named Alyssa Farman from the earlier days of the Targaryen reign, who is kind of a lover of one of the earlier Targaryens, of Rhaena Targaryen of the days of yore. And then there's like a big kind of falling out with her and Rhaena, and she ends up stealing 3 dragons and sailing to Pentos with those 3 dragon eggs. Not dragons, but eggs. And I think that canonically in the text, we very much attribute Alyssa Farman to Dany's 3 eggs, which makes him even older and the whole thing kind of even crazier and more weird and mystical. And I am a little bit furious about the Alyssa Farman erasure, but I appreciate that there's a lot of folks who are never going to read those books. I just needed to say it for the rest of us out there. Long live Alyssa Farman. She made it. She made it to the far side of the world. She found out what was west of Westeros, and she built her great ship Sunchaser, and more power to her. I'll never forget you, Alyssa Farman. Anything else, LT, before we part ways this week?
This episode, I fear, was very tame because the next episode is going to be wild.
Yeah.
We didn't get a single death in this episode.
I definitely got the tail of the dragon in front of the snoot last week, and I think I got a little bit excited about how fast we were going to accelerate, because the reality is that half a page after Eric and Eric have their duel to the death, the ish hits the fan in the book. They waste no time, so I expected us to accelerate a little faster, but next week it's definitely going to pop off if the episode title is any indicator. LT, a pleasure as always. It's a delight to have you. We'll be back in 1 week's time talking about House of the Dragon, episode 4, The Dance with Dragons. Until then, what do you got going on? Where can people find you?
Follow me on Twitter at LK Starks. If you want to learn about gymnastics, the Olympics are coming up, probably some swimming stuff going on as well. I'm going to be doing some podcasts coming up with Chappelle and Mari. So stay tuned for updates about those as well.
Awesome. I love them both. Mari, my co-host on the book club once upon a time, I know that she's not here for the Alyssa Farman erasure. Exactly. I'm keeping busy, LT. I'm talking about The Boys every week with Kevin over on Amazon Prime. The Boys has been very good this season. I'm really digging it. I feel like it's coming together in the 4th and 5th episodes in a great way. I'm breaking down The Acolyte with my Padawan learner, Taylor Ball, every week as we're rolling into the 6th episode of that show. We're going to stop down on What Did I Miss this week. Last week, very luckily, and the timing was excellent, Taylor made me watch How to Train Your Dragon, which felt like a very important PSA for us to break down Westeros. But this week, because I have a lot going on, we're going to fire up a Letterboxd account and we're going to rank all the movies that we have watched so far. This has been a listener requested endeavor since we got started. We've been through 15 movies. We're going to rank them all over on Letterboxd. The Wheel of Time book club, we're getting ready to read up through chapter 17, choices in book 2, The Great Hunt of Robert Jordan's epic fantasy series, The Wheel of Time. That'll be out next week. LT and I are going to talk about The Bear later this week. Season 3 dropped in total on FX, so we're going to get together and break that all down. I think I'm going to be doing some interview with the vampire coverage at some point this week as well, so I am keeping plenty busy. Make sure that you follow us on all the socials at Screen Page Pod, our social medias. These podcasts are going up on YouTube if you would like to see a video of me and LT and occasionally my cat. Go find us at the Screen and Page YouTube channel. And in the bio to all of our social medias, you'll find a link tree with directions to come and find us in the Discord, the Screen and Page Clubhouse. Come hang out. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you are thinking about all of the awesome TV that we are getting week to week this summer. It's been a pleasure. We'll be back in 1 week's time. But until then, just remember the Olympics are coming.